When 9-year-old Maya Rodriguez confidently approached the massive M1A2 Abrams tank during Fort Knox's annual Family Day, Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison couldn't help but chuckle at the tiny girl who claimed she could fix the engine problem that had stumped his entire maintenance crew for 3 weeks. Standing barely 4 feet tall with oil-stained coveralls that were clearly too big for her, Maya looked more like she was playing dress-up than offering serious mechanical assistance. But when she rolled up her sleeve to reveal her late grandfather's Army Ranger's patch sewn carefully onto her shirt and began speaking in technical terms that made veteran mechanics stop and listen, Morrison's dismissive smile faded as quickly as his assumptions about what expertise looked like in a 9-year-old package. The morning sun cast long shadows across the vehicle maintenance bay at Fort Knox as families began gathering for the monthly community event that allowed military dependents to see their parents' work environment. Maya Rodriguez walked beside her mother, Sergeant First Class Carmen Rodriguez, her small hands clutching a worn toolbox that had belonged to her grandfather, Master Sergeant Eduardo Rodriguez, who had served 3 tours in Iraq before passing away the previous year. Maya's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes held the focused intensity of someone much older. At 9 years old, she possessed an unusual combination of mechanical curiosity and hands-on experience that had been nurtured by countless hours in her grandfather's garage, learning to diagnose problems by sound, touch, and intuition. "Mia, remember what we talked about," Carmen said gently as they approached the maintenance facility. "This is a working environment, so we need to stay with the tour group and not wander off." Maya nodded dutifully, but her attention was already drawn to the massive tanks and armored vehicles that filled the maintenance bays. The sounds of hydraulic systems, diesel engines, and pneumatic tools created a mechanical symphony that reminded her of the weekend lessons her grandfather had given her in his workshop. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison stood near the entrance to Bay 7, his muscular frame and confident bearing reflecting 15 years of experience, maintaining some of the Army's most sophisticated equipment. At 34, Jake had earned his position through technical competence and leadership ability, but he also carried the pride that sometimes made experienced soldiers resistant to suggestions from outside their established hierarchy. "Welcome to the vehicle maintenance facility," Jake announced as the first group of families approached. "I'm Staff Sergeant Morrison, and today we'll be showing you how we keep America's armor rolling." These M1A2 Abrams tanks represent the finest military engineering in the world, and maintaining them requires years of specialized training. Maya listened intently, noting the way Jake's voice carried both pride and authority. She could see several tanks in various stages of maintenance, their massive turrets and thick armor plates, creating an impressive display of military power. But her attention was drawn to one particular tank that sat silent in the corner of the bay, its engine compartment open and diagnostic equipment scattered around it. "Are all the tanks working properly?" asked Mrs. Patterson, whose husband served in the tank division. Jake's confident expression flickered slightly. "We have one unit experiencing some minor technical difficulties, but our maintenance team is working to resolve the issue through proper diagnostic procedures." Maya noticed the hesitation in his voice and the way his gaze shifted toward the silent tank. In her grandfather's workshop, she'd learned that mechanics often developed telltale signs when they were dealing with problems that frustrated them. As the tour continued through the facility, Maya found herself lagging behind the group, drawn by the sounds and smells of the maintenance work. She could hear the distinctive whine of a hydraulic pump running inefficiently and the irregular idle of a diesel engine that wasn't firing on all cylinders. Specialist Tommy Chun, a 22-year-old mechanic from California, noticed the small girl standing near the problematic tank and approached with the friendly demeanor of someone who genuinely enjoyed explaining his work to curious visitors. "Hey there, what's your name?" Tommy asked, kneeling down to Maya's eye level. "Maya Rodriguez." "My mom is Sergeant Rodriguez from the supply division." "Cool. And what do you think of all these big machines?" Maya studied the tank's open engine compartment with the systematic approach her grandfather had taught her. The engine sounds like it has a compression problem in one of the cylinders, and the hydraulic system is running about 10% below optimal pressure. Tommy's friendly expression shifted to surprise. "Wow, that's pretty specific. How do you know about engine compression?" "My grandfather taught me. He was a tank mechanic in Iraq, and he said that every engine has a signature sound when it's running correctly. When something changes, you can usually hear the problem before the diagnostic computers detect it." Before Tommy could respond, Staff Sergeant Morrison's voice carried across the bay. "Shun, keep the visitors with the main group. We don't need civilians wandering around active maintenance areas." Tommy looked apologetically at Maya. "Sorry, but I should get you back to the tour group." Maya nodded understanding, but her eyes remained fixed on the tank's engine compartment. Everything her grandfather had taught her about diesel mechanics suggested that the problem wasn't as complicated as the maintenance crew seemed to think. But she also understood military protocol and the importance of following proper procedures. Tour continued through the facility, with Jake explaining the various systems and maintenance procedures used to keep the armored vehicles operational. Maya absorbed every detail, comparing what she observed with the lessons her grandfather had shared about military equipment and maintenance philosophy. The M1A2 Abrams is powered by a 1,500 horsepower gas turbine engine, Jake explained to the group. It's one of the most sophisticated power plants ever installed in a combat vehicle, and maintaining it requires extensive specialized training and expensive diagnostic equipment. Maya raised her hand politely. Staff Sergeant Morrison, has the tank with the engine problem been checked for fuel system contamination? The question created an uncomfortable silence as Jake realized that a 9-year-old had identified the specific tank he'd been trying not to discuss during the tour. Several other family members turned to look at Maya with surprise. "Young lady, I appreciate your curiosity, but diagnosing complex military equipment isn't something that can be done through casual observation," Jake replied with barely concealed irritation. "Our trained mechanics are following proper diagnostic procedures to identify and resolve any issues." Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she also remembered her grandfather's advice about persistence when you believed you were. "Right. I wasn't trying to interfere, sir. It's just that the engine sound pattern reminded me of a fuel contamination problem my grandfather showed me on his pickup truck." Jake's patience was clearly wearing thin as he found himself being questioned by a child in front of a group of military families. "Miss Rodriguez, military equipment operates at standards far beyond civilian vehicles. The comparison isn't valid, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let our qualified personnel handle technical matters." Carmen Rodriguez stepped forward, recognizing the tension in the situation and wanting to diffuse it before it escalated further. "Maya, sweetheart, let's not interrupt the tour with too many questions." But Maya's mechanical instincts were too strong to ignore completely. She'd spent hundreds of hours learning to trust her observations, and everything she was hearing suggested a specific type of problem that might be easily resolved if approached correctly. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," Maya said quietly but clearly, "what if the fuel system contamination is coming from a degraded rubber seal in the fuel injector assembly? That would cause compression irregularities and affect hydraulic pressure because both systems share power from the main engine." The specificity of Maya's diagnosis sent a ripple of surprise through the assembled mechanics who had overheard the exchange. Jake found himself in the uncomfortable position of having his technical authority challenged by a 9-year-old who was demonstrating knowledge that seemed well beyond her age. Chief Warrant Officer Patricia Williams, who had been observing the tour from a distance, approached the group with the measured stride of someone whose 30 years of mechanical experience had taught her to evaluate expertise based on competence rather than credentials. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, what exactly has Miss Rodriguez observed about the tank's condition?" Chief Williams asked, her tone suggesting genuine professional interest rather than casual curiosity. Felt trapped between his desire to maintain authority and his respect for Chief Williams, whose mechanical expertise was legendary throughout the base. "Chief, Miss Rodriguez has made some observations about engine sounds, but I don't think it's appropriate to involve civilians in diagnostic procedures." Chief Williams studied Maya with the calculating gaze of someone who had learned to recognize talent in unexpected places. "Miss Rodriguez, would you be willing to explain what you're hearing that suggests fuel system contamination?" Maya felt nervous under the scrutiny of so many adults, but she also felt the confidence that came from knowing she was right about something important. "Ma'am, when a diesel engine has fuel contamination, especially from degraded seals, it creates a specific harmonic pattern in the cylinder firing sequence. You can hear it as a slight stuttering every 4th or 5th power stroke." She paused, pointing toward the tank. "Plus, if the contamination is affecting the fuel injectors, it reduces overall engine efficiency, which means the hydraulic pumps have to work harder to maintain pressure. That creates the whining sound you can hear from the hydraulic system." Chief Williams was clearly impressed by Maya's systematic analysis and technical vocabulary. "Miss Rodriguez, those are very specific observations. How did you learn to make such detailed diagnoses?" "My grandfather, Master Sergeant Eduardo Rodriguez, taught me. He said that good mechanics listen with their whole body, not just their ears, and that every mechanical system tells you what's wrong if you know how to interpret the signals." The mention of Eduardo Rodriguez caused Chief Williams to pause with obvious recognition. "Eduardo Rodriguez was your grandfather?" "I served with Eddie in Iraq. He was one of the finest mechanics I ever worked with." Maya's eyes brightened with pride and sadness. "He died last year, but he taught me everything he could about engines and mechanical systems. He said that knowledge was only valuable if you used it to help people." Chief Williams found herself remembering Eduardo Rodriguez as a sergeant who could diagnose problems that stumped more experienced mechanics and who approached every repair with methodical precision and innovative thinking. "Maya," Chief Williams said gently, "your grandfather was right about knowledge being valuable when it helps people. Would you be willing to show me exactly what you're observing about this tank's condition?" Jake Morrison felt his authority slipping away as the situation evolved beyond his control. "Chief Williams, surely we're not going to base maintenance decisions on observations from a 9-year-old, regardless of her family connections." But Chief Williams had made her decision based on both her respect for Eduardo Rodriguez and her recognition that Maya's analysis demonstrated genuine mechanical insight. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, Miss Rodriguez has identified specific symptoms that warrant investigation. Our diagnostic procedures haven't resolved this problem in 3 weeks, so perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. As the group moved toward the problematic tank, Maya felt the weight of expectation and the memory of her grandfather's teachings. This was her chance to prove that his lessons had been absorbed and understood, and to demonstrate that mechanical expertise could transcend age and official credentials when supported by knowledge and careful observation. The maintenance bay felt quiet, except for the sounds of the struggling tank engine as Maya prepared to put her grandfather's teachings to the ultimate test, knowing that failure would not only embarrass her, but also disrespect the memory of the man who had believed in her potential to carry forward his mechanical legacy. Maya approached the massive M1A2 Abrams tank with the careful steps of someone who understood that respect for dangerous machinery was the first lesson of good mechanics. The engine compartment loomed above her small frame, filled with components that weighed more than she did, and systems that operated under pressures that could cause serious injury if mishandled. Chief Williams positioned herself beside Maya, ready to intervene if safety became a concern. "Maya, I want you to describe exactly what you're observing, but remember that this is a live system with safety protocols we need to follow." Maya nodded seriously, understanding that her grandfather's teachings about safety were just as important as his lessons about diagnosis. She moved to a position where she could hear the engine clearly without getting too close to moving parts. "The main engine is running at approximately 800 RPM, which should be smooth for an idle condition," Maya began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone stating observable facts. "But every fourth power stroke, there's a slight hesitation that suggests uneven fuel delivery to cylinder number 6. Staff Sergeant Morrison crossed his arms, his skepticism evident despite Chief Williams' support for Maya's involvement. "Miss Rodriguez, cylinder numbering on military turbine engines is considerably more complex than civilian equipment. You can't simply count off problems like you're working on a car." Maya looked up at Morrison with the patient expression of someone who had learned not to take technical criticism personally. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, my grandfather taught me that the principles of internal combustion are the same whether it's a pickup truck or a tank. The difference is scale and complexity, not fundamental physics." She turned back to the engine, closing her eyes to concentrate on the acoustic patterns. "The fuel injection timing is off by approximately 15 milliseconds on cylinder 6, which is creating a cascade effect through the hydraulic system because the engine isn't maintaining consistent torque output." Specialist Chun, who had been working on the tank for the past week, stepped forward with obvious interest. "Maya, how can you tell the timing is off by listening?" "Because the power stroke happens at a specific point in the engine cycle," Maya explained, opening her eyes. "When injection timing is wrong, you hear the combustion happening either too early or too late relative to the other cylinders. It creates a rhythmic pattern that repeats every engine cycle." Chief Williams was taking mental notes, recognizing that Maya's analysis aligned with several symptoms the maintenance crew had observed but hadn't connected. "Maya, what do you think is causing the injection timing problem?" Maya moved closer to the fuel system components, studying the complex array of lines, filters, and injection assemblies. "Grandfather always said that timing problems usually come from 3 sources: mechanical wear, contamination, or pressure irregularities. Since this is military equipment with regular maintenance, mechanical wear is less likely." She pointed to a specific fuel line assembly. "That leaves contamination or pressure problems." The hydraulic whining we can hear suggests that the fuel system is demanding more power from the engine, which points to restriction somewhere in the fuel delivery chain. Morrison found himself listening despite his reservations, noting that Maya's systematic approach mirrored the diagnostic procedures taught in Army maintenance schools. "So what's your recommendation, Miss Rodriguez?" Maya considered the question carefully, understanding that her answer would determine whether the adults took her seriously or dismissed her as a curious child. "I think there's a degraded seal in the fuel injector for cylinder 6 that's allowing air into the system and contaminating the fuel mixture. The contamination is causing the timing irregularities, and the air in the system is making the fuel pumps work harder." The diagnosis was specific enough to be tested and comprehensive enough to explain all the symptoms the maintenance crew had been struggling with. Chief Williams found herself impressed by both the technical accuracy and the logical progression of Maya's analysis. "Maya, that's a very detailed diagnosis," Chief Williams said. "How would you recommend we verify your theory?" Maya's eyes lit up with the excitement of someone being asked to solve a puzzle she was confident about. "First, we should check the fuel pressure at the number 6 injector. If there's air contamination, the pressure will be lower and more variable than the other cylinders." She paused, thinking through the next steps. "Then we should examine the seal assembly for signs of degradation. Grandfather taught me that rubber seals show specific types of wear patterns when they're failing." Specialist Chun was already moving toward the diagnostic equipment. "Chief, we can run those tests pretty easily. We've got the fuel pressure gauges, and accessing the injector seals is a standard maintenance procedure." Morrison felt his resistance wavering as he watched Maya's confidence and the positive response from his crew. But accepting help from a 9-year-old still challenged everything he believed about military hierarchy and technical expertise. "Chief Williams," Morrison said carefully, "if we're going to pursue Miss Rodriguez's diagnosis, I want to make sure we follow proper safety protocols." "This is still a live weapon system." "Absolutely," Chief Williams agreed. "Maya will observe and advise, but all hands-on work will be performed by qualified personnel." "Maya, are you comfortable with that arrangement?" Maya nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. Grandfather always said that the best mechanics know when to step back and let others do the dangerous work." Over the next hour, Maya watched as the maintenance crew systematically tested her diagnosis. Specialist Chun connected pressure gauges to each fuel injector, while Sergeant Lisa Park began documenting the test results for the maintenance records. "Fuel pressure readings," Chun announced as he completed the measurements. "Cylinders 1 through 5 are showing consistent pressure at 2,850 psi. Cylinder 6 is fluctuating between 2,720 and 2,780 psi. Asterisk Maya felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with responsibility. Her diagnosis was proving correct, which meant the maintenance crew would be able to fix the problem. But it also meant that her grandfather's teachings were being validated in front of military professionals. "The pressure variation confirms air contamination in the fuel system," Maya said to Chief Williams. "Now we need to check the seal assembly to find where the air is getting in." Sergeant Park, who had been skeptical of involving a civilian child in military maintenance, found herself genuinely curious about Maya's methods. "Maya, how did your grandfather teach you to identify specific seal problems?" Maya brightened at the opportunity to share her grandfather's wisdom. "He said that every seal failure has a signature. Rubber degradation looks different from mechanical Damage and contamination creates different patterns than normal wear. She watched as Chun carefully removed the fuel injector assembly from cylinder 6, exposing the seal components that controlled fuel flow and system pressure. "There," Maya said, pointing to a specific rubber component. "See how the seal edge is swollen and has those tiny cracks? That's what happens when diesel fuel contamination breaks down the rubber compound." Chief Williams examined the seal under a magnifying glass, noting the exact conditions Maya had described. The rubber showed clear signs of chemical degradation that would allow air infiltration and cause precisely the symptoms they'd been experiencing. "Maya, you're absolutely right," Chief Williams said with obvious admiration. "This seal is definitely compromised. How did you know to look for this specific type of damage?" "Grandfather showed me probably 50 different seal failures over the years," Maya explained. "He said that understanding why things break was just as important as knowing how to fix them." Morrison studied the damaged seal, realizing that Maya's diagnosis had been not only correct but remarkably precise. A 9-year-old had identified a problem that his experienced maintenance crew had been unable to solve for 3 weeks. "Miss Rodriguez," Morrison said formally, "I owe you an apology. Your analysis was accurate, and your approach was professional. I was wrong to dismiss your observations based on your age." Maya looked up at Morrison with the generous spirit her grandfather had taught her. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, my grandfather always said that good mechanics help each other learn, regardless of rank or experience. I'm just glad I could help fix the tank." The repair itself took less than an hour once the problem was properly identified. Chun replaced the degraded seal with a new component, while Park updated the maintenance records to reflect both the diagnosis and the solution. When Chun fired up the engine for testing, the improvement was immediately obvious. The irregular firing pattern disappeared, the hydraulic whining stopped, and the massive turbine settled into the smooth idle of properly functioning military equipment. "That's a significant improvement," Chun announced as he monitored the diagnostic readouts. "All cylinders are now firing consistently, and hydraulic pressure is back to specifications." Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. She had used her grandfather's teachings to solve a real problem that affected the readiness of military equipment and the safety of soldiers who depended on that equipment. Chief Williams approached Maya with the respect accorded to a fellow professional. "Maya, what you accomplished today demonstrates the value of the knowledge your grandfather shared with you. But more importantly, it shows that you understand how to apply that knowledge responsibly." "Thank you, Chief Williams. Grandfather always said that knowledge was only valuable if it helped people do their jobs better." The successful repair had drawn attention from other mechanics in the facility, and word was spreading about the 9-year-old who had diagnosed a problem that stumped the regular maintenance crew. Captain Rebecca Torres, the facility commander, arrived to assess the situation and its implications. At 42, Captain Torres had built her career on maintaining high standards while recognizing exceptional contributions regardless of their source. She studied Maya with the calculating gaze of someone trying to understand how a child had succeeded where trained professionals had struggled. "Chief Williams, I understand we've had an unusual diagnostic situation today," Captain Torres said. "Yes, ma'am." Maya Rodriguez identified a fuel system problem that our standard procedures hadn't detected. Her analysis was accurate, and the repair has restored the vehicle to full operational status. Captain Torres looked down at Maya. Noting the confident but respectful bearing that suggested genuine technical understanding rather than lucky guesswork. Miss Rodriguez, would you be able to explain your diagnostic process to our senior maintenance staff? Maya felt nervous about addressing high-ranking military officers, but she also understood that sharing knowledge was part of the responsibility that came with her grandfather's training. Yes, ma'am. I'd be honored to explain what grandfather taught me about acoustic diagnostics. Excellent. Chief Williams, please arrange a brief presentation for our senior NCOs. Miss Rodriguez's techniques might benefit our entire maintenance program. As preparations began for the presentation, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months earlier, she had been simply a military dependent trying to honor her grandfather's memory. Now she was being asked to share technical knowledge with experienced Army mechanics. Staff. Sergeant Morrison approached Maya with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal humility. Maya, I want to thank you for your patience with my initial skepticism. You taught me an important lesson about keeping an open mind. Maya looked up at Morrison with the wisdom her grandfather had shared about learning from difficult experiences. Staff Sergeant Morrison, grandfather always said that the best mechanics were the ones who could admit when they were wrong and learn from new information. The afternoon presentation took place in the facility's conference room, with Maya standing before 15 senior mechanics and explaining the acoustic diagnostic techniques her grandfather had developed through years of experience with military equipment. The key principle, Maya explained to the assembled NCOs, is that every mechanical system creates a unique acoustic signature when it's operating correctly. Changes in that signature indicate developing problems, often before conventional diagnostic equipment can detect them. She demonstrated her techniques using recorded engine sounds, helping experienced mechanics learn to identify the subtle patterns that revealed specific types of mechanical problems. Sergeant First Class David Kim, who had 20 years of experience with armored vehicles, found himself genuinely impressed by Maya's systematic approach. Maya, how long does it typically take to develop the kind of acoustic sensitivity you've demonstrated? Grandfather said it took him about 2 years of focused practice to become consistently accurate, Maya replied. But he also said that younger people sometimes learn faster because we don't have preconceived notions about what engines should sound like. The presentation continued for over an hour, with Maya answering technical questions and demonstrating diagnostic techniques that many of the mechanics had never encountered in their formal training. Chief Williams concluded the session by addressing the broader implications of Maya's contribution. What Ms. Rodriguez has shared today represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that keeps our maintenance programs effective. Her grandfather's techniques deserve serious consideration for inclusion in our training curricula. Captain Torres nodded approvingly. Chief Williams, please work with Ms. Rodriguez to document these diagnostic procedures for potential implementation across our maintenance operations. As the meeting concluded, Maya felt overwhelmed by the recognition and the responsibility that came with it. But she also felt deeply connected to her grandfather's legacy and proud that his knowledge would continue helping soldiers maintain the equipment their safety depended on. Carmen Rodriguez, who had been waiting outside during the presentation, approached her daughter with obvious pride mixed with concern about the attention Maya was receiving. Mia, how do you feel about all this recognition? Carmen asked gently. Maya considered the question while watching mechanics return to their regular duties with new diagnostic techniques to practice and implement. I feel like grandfather would be proud that his knowledge is helping keep soldiers safe. That's what he always said was most important. Are you sure you're comfortable with all this responsibility? You're still just 9 years old." Maya looked up at her mother with the mature perspective that her grandfather's teachings had helped develop. "Mom, I think being 9 means I have more time to learn and grow. Grandfather always said that the best mechanics were the ones who never stopped studying and improving." 3 months later, Maya stood in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, wearing her best dress and carrying a folder containing the formal documentation of her grandfather's acoustic diagnostic techniques. The ceremony recognizing her contribution to Army maintenance procedures represented validation of both her individual capabilities and her grandfather's innovative legacy. General Patricia Hayes, the Army's senior logistics officer, approached the podium with the bearing of someone whose career had been built on recognizing and nurturing excellence in unexpected places. "Today we honor not only exceptional technical contribution, but also the continuation of military knowledge across generations," General Hayes announced to the assembled audience of Army personnel and military families. Maya felt nervous butterflies in her stomach as she realized that her story had become part of official Army recognition programs. But she also felt the steady presence of her grandfather's teachings, reminding her that knowledge was only valuable when it served others. Miss Maya Rodriguez has demonstrated that expertise can emerge from unexpected sources, and that our military families possess knowledge that contributes directly to operational readiness. General Hayes continued. The formal presentation included documentation of how Maya's diagnostic techniques had been implemented at maintenance facilities across 3 Army installations, resulting in faster problem identification and reduced equipment downtime. Chief Williams, who had been promoted to warrant officer following her leadership in implementing the Rodriguez diagnostic protocols, stood to address the gathered audience. "Maya Rodriguez represents the best traditions of military families," Chief Williams said. "Her grandfather's knowledge, combined with her own dedication to learning, has created innovations that benefit soldiers throughout the Army." As Maya received formal recognition for her contributions, she thought about her grandfather's workshop and the countless hours they had spent together learning about engines and mechanical systems. His greatest gift hadn't been the technical knowledge itself, but the understanding that knowledge carried responsibility to help others. Staff Sergeant Morrison, who had requested permission to attend the ceremony, approached Maya after the formal presentations concluded. "Maya, I wanted you to know that the techniques you taught us have helped our maintenance crew identify problems in 6 different vehicles over the past 3 months," Morrison said. "Your grandfather's methods are making a real difference in our operational readiness." Maya felt deep satisfaction knowing that her grandfather's work was continuing to protect soldiers and maintain the equipment they depended on. "Thank you for being willing to learn new techniques, Staff Sergeant Morrison. Grandfather always said that the best mechanics were the ones who stayed open to new ideas." As the ceremony concluded and Maya prepared to return to Fort Knox with her mother, she reflected on the journey that had transformed personal loss into meaningful contribution. Her grandfather's death had initially felt like the end of their shared mechanical adventures, but it had actually been the beginning of her own path toward carrying forward his innovative legacy. Carmen Rodriguez watched her daughter interact with senior Army officers and experienced mechanics with a mixture of pride and amazement. The shy 9-year-old who had lost her grandfather the previous year had emerged as someone capable of contributing meaningful innovation to military operations. "Maya, are you ready to go home?" Carmen asked as they gathered their belongings. Maya looked around the Pentagon's impressive halls, understanding that she was leaving behind a remarkable experience, but carrying forward responsibilities and opportunities that would shape her future. "Yes, Mom, but I think Grandfather would want me to keep learning and finding new ways to help soldiers with their equipment." As they walked toward their car, Maya felt the weight of her grandfather's memory and the lightness of possibilities yet to be explored. She had proven that expertise could transcend age and conventional expectations. But more importantly, she had demonstrated that knowledge shared with humility and purpose could create positive change in institutions that protected the people who served their country. The story that began with a dismissed 9-year-old offering unsolicited mechanical advice had evolved into official recognition of innovative diagnostic techniques that would benefit Army maintenance operations for years to come. Maya Rodriguez had learned that her grandfather's greatest gift wasn't just technical knowledge, but the understanding that true expertise meant using whatever talents you possess to help others accomplish their missions safely and effectively. Her future stretched ahead, filled with educational opportunities, technical challenges, and the possibility of following her grandfather's path into military service. But regardless of the specific direction her life took, Maya understood that she would always carry forward Eduardo Rodriguez's most important lesson, that knowledge was only valuable when it served others, and that the best mechanics were the ones who never stopped learning, teaching, and finding new ways to keep the people around them safe.